Now that the American Revolution is over, the newly formed United States is going to have a big kind of question, a big kind of issue, and that's going to be all right, well, we have established this new nation, but how are we going to run it? And this is really going to be, this lecture is really going to be about the Articles of Confederation, the Bill of Rights, all of that. And as we get to the Constitution of the United States, right? So it's kind of like now what? We've escaped. We are now officially our own independent nation, but with that, becomes great responsibility in the fact that we have to figure out how to run this thing, and we got to figure out what we're going to do, and we got to figure out how we're going to effectively become, a powerful nation. We've had a little bit of experience, but stepping out and being our own nation for the first time, that's something that's never really happened before. So it's important that we understand that these people and these individuals are going to be responsible for not only setting up the United States, but really establishing the foundation in which the nation is going to be built on. And we're going to start with something called the Articles of Confederation. So it says after independence, states chose how they were to carry out their own form of government. So in 1777, the Continental Congress adopted the Articles of Confederation, which is going to be ratified in 1781. Now, here's the problem. The Articles of Confederation is established to be nothing like Great Britain. So in Great Britain, the power was held in the government. So the Articles of Confederation is not going to give the government that much power. It's actually going to give more power to the states, which is a problem. And we'll get into that in a second. So it says, under the Articles, some powers were granted to the central government, but most were left up to the individual states, right? We do not want to be like Britain. So here are the problems with the Articles of Confederation. So the federal government can only do a couple of things. Number one, it can only declare war. And number two, it can only really be responsible for handling foreign affairs. Any amendments that want to be added to the Articles of Confederation is going to take approval of all 13 states. So if one state does not do it, it can't be passed. The states are going to print individual currencies. And this is going to limit the growth of the American economy because you're going to have a kind of exchange rates, and you're going to have other things when dealing with that because, if you're trying to, I don't know how many of you have ever been out of the country before, but if you're trying to, if you're in Europe and you're trying to establish, you're trying to buy something with an American dollar, most places you can't do that. You have to buy it with a euro. So you have to go and exchange it. The same thing's going to happen between here when you're talking about different countries because South Carolina is going to have a different currency than Georgia, and Georgia's going to have a different one than New York. So this is all very important when you're talking about the growth of the American economy. The federal government, they're not going to have any power to collect taxes, and they're only going to be relying on voluntary contributions from the states, which is kind of a joke, right? Because there's a saying that, the rich are rich for a reason. It's not because they're giving away money. And not collecting taxes is going to be a big thing. Now, a lot of people are very anti-tax. You can still see this in the United States today, especially with the election coming up. People are going to look for these lower tax rates, and that's simply because when you get money, you don't want to give it away, right? But a tax is almost a necessary need because your taxes pay for a lot of things. They pay for, governmental positions. They pay for the upkeep of where you're living. They pay for a military. They pay for all these things that are like resources essentially for the United States. Well, here's the problem. No federal tax, so you're not getting taxed on your income or anything like that, which means fewer resources for a federal army. And that not having a federal army is going to be a big deal in a second. The other thing that's going to happen is Americans are going to start to venture west. So as many Americans start to venture west, these are into lands that we were not allowed to venture into when we were under control of the British. You're going to have these issues of trying to start setting up and establishing these territories. And what this is going to start is something called the Northwest Ordinance in 1787. And what this is going to do, this is going to outline the steps for a territory to apply for statehood, and it's going to be based on population requirements. So essentially, it's how it works. You have a piece of land that nobody lives off of, right? And then that land is essentially labeled a territory. So Nebraska territory, the Ohio territory, whatever you want to be. Individuals then move on to that territory and then begin to populate it. Well, once they reach a certain population, they can apply for statehood. Now, this Northwest Ordinance is going to be in the states listed below, which is, Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Michigan, Wisconsin, parts of Minnesota. And here's a couple of things that are very big, and this is going to be a very big set point for future addition to states into the United States. The number one thing they're going to have is you cannot have slavery. So slavery is going to be banned in these territories. All right, now here's the other thing. As you're moving west, you're going to have increased interactions with Native Americans. All right, this also breaks the promise of the proclamation line of 1763. The 1763 proclamation says that we cannot go west of the Appalachian Mountains. Well, that was, again, when we were still under British control. So this is going to allow us to go west, all right? The second thing besides the banning of slavery is it's going to call for the establishment of free public schools. So you must have a school. And this is very important because I think the founding fathers understand that, or the people setting up the country understand that education is very important. If you want to be among the ranks of Britain and France and Spain and other parts in Europe, then you have to establish your education system. Now, education in the beginning is going to be very hard because people are spread out. There still is this need to get your work done on the farm, and just adequate education is going to be big. But in these territories and when they establish their, states and these towns, they're going to have to set aside a plot for a public schoolhouse, which is going to be big. All right. And these are kind of the lands that I'm talking about. If you're looking up here in this Northwest Territory, this is obviously the lands that I was just talking about, the Ohio, Indiana, Michigan, Minnesota, Wisconsin, all of that. This is this area. Yes, Georgia did extend all the way to the Mississippi at one point. That is not a mistake. Okay. And then you got to understand, there are other parts of the United States that are claimed by other countries, right? So Spain owns all of this. This is an unclaimed territory. It'll be kind of split between the United States and Britain in the future, but these territories are not all. We only have west to the Mississippi. So yes, this is huge because we gained this much land and we gained the entire United States, but we don't own all the way to California. So don't get that confused by any means. So we're going to run into our first crisis, which is going to be something known as Daniel Shay's Rebellion. And this really highlights kind of the issue with the Articles of Confederation. So here's a little background. So Daniel Shay's Rebellion happened in 1786 through 1787. So farmers in western Massachusetts, whom many of were veterans to the American Revolution, were angered at the state for calling back taxes owed. So the state was broke from war. So everybody had been putting in their money to pay for the American Revolution. We get that. Many farmers are going to have their property seized by the state because they can't pay back these taxes and they don't really want to. So they're going to have their property seized and they're going to be put in prison for not paying back these taxes. Remember, we borrowed money from Spain. We borrowed money from France. We borrowed military from France. We're going to have to start paying people back for the loan that they give us. Well, many people are not going to be happy about these taxes. They're saying, wait a minute, we just fought a war because we did not want to be taxed, right? Although they were fighting no taxation without representation, now they're going to be able to have, representation in the government. And, the Articles of Confederation and the people in government are saying, look, we have to pay back these war debts. I'm sorry. This just is what it is. And so Daniel Shay is going to lead a charge and he's going to violently protest these foreclosures and imprisonments. And Shay and his fellow farmers are going to really, really set the scene here. They're going to set fire to courthouses through central and western Massachusetts. And they're going to essentially, I guess their goal was, if I burn down the courthouses where all the tax collecting documents are, they don't have the iCloud. So essentially, it's gone. That's not how it's going to work, but I do get this kind of idea. And the rebellion is going to get out of hand, and no one can stop it. In today's world, if there's a rebellion or if there's some sort of uprising in the city, what happens? Well, the police get brought in. There's number one, and if the police cannot handle it, the National Guard and the Army gets brought in. That's number two. Okay, well, those don't exist right now. So the goal of Shay's would eventually get out of hand and could turn to complete overthrow of the state government of Massachusetts. And again, the big problem is they cannot stop this. All right, and so what's going to happen is some people are going to fund a small militia, but again, the militia shuts it down. Yes, but the federal government, this is a larger problem than just, oh, it was a small outbreak. No, this is a problem. And so Massachusetts is unsuccessful in quelling the rebellion. Like I said, a private militia is going to be raised to eventually stop the militant rebellion. And then it says, remember, the federal government could not collect taxes from states. Therefore, they had no federal army to handle the rebellion. Okay? So Daniel Shay's rebellion highlights a weakness in the Articles of Confederation, right? And this is the inability of states to effectively respond to crisis situations. So this is bigger than just Daniel Shay, right? People in government are going, okay, well, if we can't shut down this small group of farmers, what are we going to do if a large group rebels? What are we going to do if we get attacked? What are we going to do if the British come back over here? We don't have an army. We're just going to call everybody back? No. So it starts to kind of develop this question of, is this the right document and is this the right way that we need to be governing ourselves in this new nation? And this kind of hits on the impact of Shay's rebellion. So Shay's rebellion forced Americans to kind of reevaluate the effectiveness of the Articles of Confederation. It calls into question the logic of leaving, important tasks up to the state governments. This event is going to lead eventually to a call for a stronger central government, which means they want a stronger federal government. All right, so I think we need to kind of pause here, and you need to understand there's a difference between state governments and federal governments. The federal government, is like the president. The federal government is over the entire United States. Your state government is over just your state, right? So each state has different rules. I don't know if you all have understood that. There's a website you can find that's weird laws in certain states, like certain dogs have to wear reflective collars after 6 p.m. if you're walking them, or else you can get fined, or there's certain, you can't own a camel in certain states. It's certain stuff like that. So it's kind of interesting, but you got to understand that there's a difference between the federal government and the state government. All right. And this is going to lead to the Constitutional Convention of 1787. And that is where I'm going to stop today. Tomorrow we will pick up on the Constitutional Convention as we kind of progress from the Articles of Confederation into more of what we know in today's society.